Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, I know it's one day late, but I am doing a little celebration of Robert E. Howard's birthday. So, Robert E. Howard was born on January 22nd, 1906, and unfortunately passed away on June 11th, 1936. So, very short life, only 30 years. And within the last 10 or 12 years of his life, the the crown of the father of sword and sorcery could not have been more well placed and more deservingly placed on Robert E. Howard's head. I mean, without his approach to writing, approach to fiction writing, and that combination of some historical knowledge, especially looking at ancient civilizations and geography and that kind of thing that he brought to all of his characters, whether it be Conan or Kull or Solomon Kane, Bran McMorn, El Barak, and others, including some of his Breckenridge Elkins and his Western stories. He, well, along with his contemporaries, he took H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos and mixed it in with his storytelling as well. I mean, just a phenomenal author, by far my favorite author. As you can see behind me there, you see I have a display of Robert E. Howard, and I have Conan, the 1982 movie poster up there, and I have probably everything that Robert E. Howard ever written in a variety of sources, and that's what I want to show off and talk a little bit about um, the various books that you can take a look at in order to really either introduce yourself or get the most authentic reprintings of Robert E. Howard's stories. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. And even though these might not be the most coveted of issues to have of his writings, they are, like I said, amongst the most authentic and ones that you can still buy today. So you could still go onto Amazon and get virtually any one of these for about $16 or $17 or so in trade paperback. So let me start going through each of them. Now, I do an entire short series of videos on my channel just talking about the key contents of my Robert E. Howard collection, which is really quite extensive, and I haven't even gotten beyond these paperbacks. Here is the first of the Del Rey series of trade paperbacks. Highly recommend getting these. I certainly would grab them if because at some point they might actually go out of print, and so really important to have these. These are readable. In other words, you don't have to worry so much about about their condition. These are meant to be opened up and read, and you can also get many of these on audio, which I intend to take a look at some of the other ones and make sure. I have virtually all of these on audio as well, with the exception of Sword Woman, which I'm going to look into in order to get that on audio. Um, and then there are one or two others in this series of Robert E. Howard books that I don't have because they're stories that I have all over the place in other forms, other novels, other hardbacks, and such. But anyway, Conan the Cimmerian is the first of the Conan stories, and there are just so many important stories that are in here. So we have Samaria, we have the Phoenix on the Sword, the Frost Giant's Daughter, the God in the Bowl, the Tower of the Elephant, the Scarlet Citadel, Queen of the Black Coast, Black Colossus, Iron Shadows in the Moon, Zathal of the Dusk, the Pool of the Black One, Rogues in a House, the Veil of Lost Women, and the Devil in Iron. I mean, of these, some of the significant ones that you probably recognize more so because of the artists and their work that were attached to this. So, Frank Frazetta's The Frost Giant's Daughter just screams, Conan the Barbarian, and Robert E. Howard just captures that in its entirety. So, highly, highly recommend this. The second in that series is the Bloody Crown of Conan, and I'm not going to go through the entire selection, but all of these are also illustrated by Gary Gianni, and just incredible illustrations. And in the hardbacks that I do have, um, these are actually color plates, and so I certainly will break out one of those to show that off at some point. Those won't be video shorts. Those will be, take a look at this and just see these books for their artistry and their importance to any Robert E. Howard collector. But anyway, um, getting back here, the most of this particular book is The Hour of the Dragon, which is the only Conan novel that Robert E. Howard had written. But it also has The People of the Black Circle and A Witch Shall Be Born, which is one of my favorite short stories of Conan the Barbarian. And then we finally have The Conquering Sword of Conan. And in this volume, there is, let's see what the key stories are. So here we have Beyond the Black River and Red Nail. So two other iconic short stories. Um, so Beyond the Black River is when Conan delves into Pictland and into the Pictus wilderness and does a series of battles there. One of the most dangerous places on Robert E. Howard's Hyborian Age Earth, because that's where it really takes place on. And Red Nails features an iconic story where Conan pairs up with and joins forces with Valeria, this time in a jungle temple and a lost civilization that kind of had decimated itself. Two warring factions had actually wiped out an entire civilization, and so I won't spoil it any more than that. Then we have probably the next most well-known or notable of Robert E. Howard's characters is Solomon Kane. And so Solomon Kane is obviously he's a Puritan, and um, some of these stories that are in here as well are, so these are more historical fictions. These are set in a closer to um, just beyond the Middle Ages, kind of 16th century settings here. And one of my favorites is The Rattle of Bones, one of my favorite short stories here. But this has The Skull and the Stars, Red Shadows, which is probably more famous than Rattle of Bones. The Castle of the Devil is another one that really stands out for most, and just another character that is, sometimes you might think, oh well, all of these characters are very similar in a way, but not when you really when you really dig in deeper on each of these characters. They have all different motivations and such, but they all have that very common thread between them. So you can tell that the same author had created them, but they're nuanced, different enough that they each stand on their own. Probably the third most well known is Cull of Atlantis, and so Exiles of Atlantis, and one of the or a few of the key stories in here. Let's get to it. We have well, in this here you have by this axe I rule, which became the phoenix on the sword for Conan. So it was originally written for Cull, and then Robert E. Howard ended up rewriting it and putting Conan in that storyline because Conan was starting to really pick up in in Weird Tales, and there was a higher demand for more Conan stories, and so he retooled Cull for that. Let's see what else really stands out. Kings of the Night um, is an interesting story because it's a Bran McMorn story, which is the next book that I was going to talk about, but it brings these two characters together. Uh, Bran Mac Bran McMorn is a Pictish king. He's the last of the Pictish kings, and he has a dream that he's fighting for his life. And Cull, King Cull, the Conqueror, comes and aids him, or vice versa. It's really hard to tell from. I mean, it's told from Bran McMorn's perspective, but I think it's much more of a metaphor of just the old world dying and the older civilizations fading away, and in one last gasp they come together to try to just to try to survive. And Robert E. Howard had always used the theme of civilization taking over the barbarous world, and whether or not that was a good thing. And I mean, he was pretty clear that he thought the barbarous world, the less civilized world, was actually a truer world to actually live in. And the concept of the noble savage, um, even though he wouldn't have called it, he wouldn't have called those earlier civilizations as savages, because he felt that civilization was far more savage than those older civilizations. So you really get that sense of just old, prehistoric um, value uh, that is lost due to the rise of civilization. And some of the stories in here, you'll find like the little people and the children of the night, the lost race. All of these are really talking to that subject. Um, Moving on, we have the fourth, maybe a fourth or possibly fifth, fifth character that not so much as well known as the others, obviously. So El Barak, and here we have someone in the I want to say that this is the 18th century, so early 1900s, and he is an adventurer that is going through the Middle East, um, more the Far East, so like Afghanistan and such. And these are really good, interesting stories. You have some tie-ins to other characters in Robert E. Howard's repertoire. So of these, like the daughter of Erlich Khan, and Erlich Khan is the Lord of the Dead in another novel of Robert E. Howard's, and I'll of course be showcasing that here as well. at some point. But Three Bladed Doom is another really well known story that was put out in its own novel, so small paperback novel. Son of the White Wolf, Swords of Shadowzar, and like I said, Three Bladed Doom. They have it here in the long version and a shorter version of it. Um, Again, these are all from the original writings presented as Robert E. Howard had written them. In some of his writings that were translated to hardcover in the 1950s or so, some of his imagery and some of his, wording and everything had been changed to reflect a more modern, at the time, the 1950s, for them it was a more modern view of things. And unfortunately, um, they used a more modern lens in deciding what they were going to put out. And it's really great to see that they went back. Del Rey Books went back to the original writings and recreated them there. And then finally, Sword Woman. So here, Sword Woman, you're going to find that Robert E. Howard wrote about strong female protagonists, and it wasn't just Belit in the in the Conan stories, or Valeria in the Conan stories, like in Red Nails. Queen of the Black Coast was Belit, but he also wrote about Dark Agnes of Castillon, who a um, became a model in some way, or an inspiration for Red Sonja, that really appeared in the comics more so than Robert E. Howard actually never wrote of Red Sonja. At least to my, I mean, maybe it was in a short story someplace, and I'm just misplacing it through all of the other materials that I have here, but definitely inspired by here. So some of the stories here, and these are again historical fictions, mostly set in the Roman Empire time, and and the fall of Rome, and such. So we have Hawks Over Egypt. We have The Road to Azrael, The Lion of Tiberias. Let's see, Hawks Over Outremer. Those are all some of the major ones that are in here. And I'm looking for uh, Blades of France, which is the primary story that Dark Agnes is, is focused on. So again, some examples of his female protagonists that are also in here. So combined up, I mean, I just presented you with one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight trade paperbacks, all still available, and some of the best examples of Robert E. Howard's writing, and you've given virtually everything here. There are two other trade paperbacks that I actually do need to get my hands on, just to complete the entire series, even though I have those stories in a variety of other places, and some of those, because those are anthologies, and they will pull from these other books as well. So they are kind of a reprinting of it, but I'm somewhat of a completionist, so I do want to have those as well in here. There's like the Crimson Tides, which are like a series of pirate themed stories. And Like I said, I have those in other versions as well. So, but I probably still will get them. So, anyway, as always, I mean, I love to talk about things that, truly had inspired me, whether it be Robert E. Howard and his writing, or J.R. Tolkien, or H.P. Lovecraft, or Dungeons and Dragons. And, all of these things kind of came to me, around the age of 10 or 11 years old, around the sixth grade. And at some point, I was hit with the spark of just wanting to read and play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know which came first. I don't recall if it was the first time that I had read a Robert E. Howard story, uh, Conan, and then got into Dungeons and Dragons, or Conan led to the Lord of the Rings, and then Dungeons and Dragons. I think the Dungeons and Dragons came slightly before Lord of the Rings. I remember reading Lord of the Rings um, in the seventh grade, and I read The Hobbit and all three Lord of the Rings novels during a summer vacation, a 1 week summer vacation. I read all four during that time. And I know Conan was before that. And I know Dungeons and Dragons was before that as well. So I'm just not familiar with which one, or don't recall which came first. Robert E. Howard and or Dungeons and Dragons. I know that Savage Sword of Conan was another major influence on my wanting to read about Conan the character as well. I consider Roy Thomas to be, next to Robert E. Howard himself. I think that Roy Thomas is the second best Conan the Barbarian author. That contributed to Robert E. Howard's writing. So even Robert E. Howard's co-authors, throughout the many decades, DeCamp or Carter or Wagner. I always forget all the things. I never liked Jordan, but you know those those authors, as good as they may have been in their own right, I don't think compare with Roy Thomas's dealing with Robert E. Howard stories. So that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's like I said, I wish it was yesterday, but I just didn't get around to making this video. So January 22nd, the birthday of Robert E. Howard, and just again, a great author, and great storyteller, and just an author that has really changed. I don't think we might have role playing games if it wasn't for Robert E. Howard, um, and just the spark that he gave to so many people in the sword and sorcery or fantasy genre to create role playing games like we have today. So enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one. Take care.